The morning sun cast a golden hue over the private airfield as Sundar Pichai stepped out of his black Tesla. At 52, the CEO of Google and Alphabet carried himself with quiet confidence, dressed in his signature simple button-down shirt and dark pants. His security team flanked him as he walked toward the sleek Gulfstream G650 waiting on the tarmac. "Good morning, Mr. Pichai," greeted Captain Reynolds, a veteran pilot with salt and pepper hair and 20 years of experience flying executives. "Weather looks clear all the way to New York. Should be a smooth 5-hour flight." Sundar nodded with a smile. "Perfect. I have a presentation to finish before we land." It was Tuesday, and Sundar was headed to New York for a major technology conference where he would unveil Google's newest AI advancements. The stakes were high. Competitors were closing in, and shareholders expected innovation. Flight attendant Maria Chen welcomed him aboard with a warm smile. "Your usual seat is ready, sir. Coffee will be served once we reach cruising altitude." The private jet's interior gleamed with understated luxury, cream leather seats, polished wood tables, and state-of-the-art technology. Besides Sundar, only 4 others were on board: his chief of staff Amit Patel, security head Robert Garcia, and the 2-person flight crew. Amit sat across from Sundar, already reviewing documents on his tablet. "The board members will be waiting at the Four Seasons. We have 2 hours before the first meeting." "Did the technical team send the final demo?" Sundar asked, settling into his seat and buckling up. "Just came in this morning. I've loaded it onto your secure drive." Captain Reynolds' voice came over the intercom as the engines hummed to life. "Gentlemen, we're cleared for takeoff. Please ensure your seatbelts are fastened." The jet taxied down the runway before lifting smoothly into the clear blue California sky. Sundar gazed out the window, watching Silicon Valley shrink beneath them. 20 minutes later, they reached cruising altitude of 45,000 feet. Maria served coffee in fine porcelain cups as Sundar opened his laptop. For the next hour, he rehearsed his presentation while Amit made notes. The plane flew over the Rockies, its powerful engines cutting through thin air with barely a vibration. "Your delivery on the quantum computing section needs more emphasis," Amit suggested. "That's what will get the headlines." Sundar nodded, making notes. "Let's run through it again." 2 hours into the flight, Maria approached with fresh drinks. "We're making good time, gentlemen. Clear skies ahead." Just as she finished speaking, the plane shuddered. Not the usual turbulence, but something different, a deep mechanical groan followed by a slight tilt. Sundar and Amit exchanged glances. "Probably just an air pocket," Amit said. Captain Reynolds' voice came over the intercom, his tone professional but with an edge Sundar hadn't heard before. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some instrument inconsistencies. Nothing to worry about, but I'll be monitoring the situation closely." Sundar's phone buzzed with a message from his wife. "Safe travels. Call when you land." He typed a quick reply, not mentioning the minor issue. The plane steadied, and work resumed. 20 minutes passed in focused silence. Then the lights flickered once, twice, and went out. Emergency lighting bathed the cabin in an eerie blue glow. The intercom crackled. "This is your captain. We have a situation that requires my full attention. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." Sundar's heart raced as he closed his laptop. Through his window, he noticed they were banking left, away from their planned route. Something was very wrong. The emergency lights cast long shadows across Sundar's face as he gripped the armrests. The plane banked harder to the left, causing his tablet to slide across the polished table. "What's happening?" Amit whispered, his usual calm demeanor cracking. Before Sundar could answer, Captain Reynolds' voice returned over the intercom, deliberately measured. "Gentlemen, we're experiencing electrical issues. I've shut down non-essential systems as a precaution. We're diverting to Denver International Airport." Robert, the security head, unbuckled and moved forward. "I'll check with the crew," he said, his training kicking in. The plane leveled briefly, then shuddered again. Sundar pulled up the flight map on his phone. They were over Colorado, roughly halfway to New York. Denver was about 20 minutes away if they maintained altitude and speed. "Sir." Maria appeared at his side, her professional smile gone. "Captain asks that you stow all electronic devices immediately." We're having issues with the electrical systems. As Sundar tucked away his phone, he noticed something out the window that sent a chill through him. The right engine's usual blue glow flickered erratically, pulsing like a dying heartbeat. "The engine," he said, pointing. Robert returned, his face grim. "It's not just electrical. Something's interfering with multiple systems. The pilots are working the problem." The plane dipped suddenly, dropping several hundred feet in seconds. Coffee cups crashed to the floor. Warning lights flashed across the cabin. "Oxygen masks will deploy if cabin pressure becomes an issue," Maria instructed, bracing herself against a seat. "Please remain calm." Amit pulled out a small photo of his family and stared at it briefly before tucking it back into his pocket. The gesture wasn't lost on Sundar, who thought of his own wife and children waiting at home. The intercom crackled again, this time with the co-pilot's voice. "Prepare for turbulence. We're descending to 25,000 feet to find clearer air." As they dropped altitude, the cabin temperature rose noticeably. Sweat beaded on Sundar's forehead. Years of leading one of the world's largest tech companies through crisis had taught him to remain outwardly calm, but his mind raced through worst-case scenarios. "I think someone's trying to bring us down," Robert said quietly, leaning close to Sundar. "What do you mean?" Sundar asked, keeping his voice low. "The timing, the multiple systems failing simultaneously. This isn't random." The words hung in the air between them, heavier than the turbulence rocking the plane. Just then, Maria hurried from the cockpit, her face pale. "The pilots need to make an emergency landing. Denver's too far. We're diverting to a smaller airfield." Through his window, Sundar saw the right engine sputter, then flare with a bright orange glow. A thin trail of black smoke streamed behind it. "Eagle County Regional Airport is 12 minutes away," Maria continued. "Please take emergency positions." Sundar and Amit exchanged glances. Eagle County was a small airport in the mountains, primarily serving ski tourists, not designed for emergency landings of private jets with failing systems. Captain Reynolds' voice returned, all pretense of routine gone. "Mayday, Mayday. This is November 75 Golf Papa declaring an emergency. We have multiple system failures and possible engine fire. Request immediate emergency landing clearance at Eagle County." The radio crackled with the controller's response. "November 75 Golf Papa, Eagle County Tower. Emergency crews are being dispatched. Runway 3 is clear for your approach." Sundar felt the plane banking again, descending more rapidly now. Through breaks in the clouds, he glimpsed jagged mountain peaks alarmingly close to their flight path. Robert leaned in again. "Sir, if this is deliberate, whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. The question is, are they finished yet?" The cabin lights failed completely as the plane continued its desperate descent toward the small mountain airport, leaving everyone in darkness and fear. Darkness enveloped the cabin as the plane continued its steep descent. The only light came from the emergency floor markers and the occasional flash of lightning outside, illuminating the worried faces inside. "Brace for landing. Head down, arms crossed," Maria instructed, demonstrating the position. Her voice remained steady despite the fear evident in her eyes. Sundar could feel the plane dropping altitude rapidly. His ears popped painfully as Captain Reynolds fought to control their descent. Through the window, the jagged Rocky Mountains loomed dangerously close, their peaks disappearing into low-hanging clouds. "Eagle County Airport, this is November 75 Golf Papa. We're experiencing severe control issues. Request immediate emergency services." The captain's voice crackled over the radio, audible now throughout the cabin as the intercom system faltered. "How bad is it really?" Sundar asked Robert, who had just returned from checking with the pilots. "Bad," Robert replied, keeping his voice low. "Primary and backup navigation systems are giving conflicting readings. The right engine is failing, and," he hesitated. "The pilots found evidence of tampering in the flight computer." The word tampering hung in the air like a death sentence. This wasn't a random mechanical failure. Someone had wanted this plane to go down. The jet banked hard to the right, causing everyone to grip their armrests. Sundar's laptop slid across the table and crashed to the floor. 5 minutes to landing, the co-pilot announced. "Eagle County is reporting winds at 18 knots, gusting to 25. Amit looked at Sundar, his face ashen. Who would want to do this? And why now? Sundar's mind raced through possibilities. The AI announcement scheduled for tomorrow would change the industry landscape. Several competitors would see their stock prices affected. Then there were the international implications. Certain governments had expressed concerns about Google's new encryption protocols. I don't know, Sundar replied honestly, but we need to focus on surviving the next 5 minutes first. The right engine suddenly howled, a high-pitched whine that made everyone flinch. Then it went completely silent. The sudden loss of power sent the plane lurching to the right. We've lost the right engine, Captain Reynolds announced, his voice strained with effort. Beginning approach with single-engine operation. Maria moved quickly through the cabin, checking seatbelts and removing any loose items. When we land, exit quickly but orderly. Follow emergency personnel instructions. Through breaks in the clouds, Sundar could now see the small airport below. Eagle County Regional was primarily used for private jets bringing wealthy tourists to nearby Vail and Beaver Creek ski resorts, not for emergency landings of damaged aircraft. Runway in sight, the captain announced. Emergency vehicles standing by. The plane descended through a layer of clouds, emerging into rain. The single working engine strained as Captain Reynolds fought to maintain their approach angle. The mountain seemed impossibly close on both sides, a narrow valley with little room for error. Sundar pulled his phone out one last time, quickly typing a message to his wife. Landing now. Love you. He pressed send, not knowing if it would go through. 30 seconds to touchdown came the co-pilot's voice. Brace positions, everyone. Sundar tucked his head down as instructed, arms crossed over his chest. The plane shuddered violently as it hit an air pocket. Through the window, he could see fire trucks and ambulances lining the runway, their lights flashing urgently in the gray mountain rain. This is it, Robert said, his voice calm despite everything. Whatever happens, sir, it's been an honor. The jet dropped the final few hundred feet rapidly, the single engine screaming with effort. Rain lashed against the windows as the ground rushed up to meet them. Sundar closed his eyes and thought of his family one last time as the wheels touched down with a screeching jolt that seemed to tear through the entire aircraft. Their fight for survival was only beginning. The wheels slammed against the wet runway with bone-jarring force. The jet bounced once, twice, before firmly touching down. Captain Reynolds fought the controls, the left engine roaring as he deployed the thrust reversers. The plane shuddered violently, veering right without the balance of both engines. Hold on, shouted Robert as the aircraft skidded, hydroplaning on the rain-slicked tarmac. Sundar gripped his armrests, knuckles white. Through the window, he saw the edge of the runway approaching rapidly. The small mountain airport had limited runways, much shorter than what the Gulf Stream typically required. The captain applied the brakes fully, causing a shrill screech of rubber against wet concrete. The overwhelming smell of burning brake pads filled the cabin. We're not going to stop in time, Amit whispered, eyes fixed on the rapidly approaching end of the runway. Just as it seemed they would careen off into the grass, the jet slowed dramatically and came to a halt less than 50 feet from the runway's end. For a moment, complete silence filled the cabin as everyone processed that they were alive and on the ground. Everyone okay? Captain Reynolds called back, his voice strained from exertion. Emergency vehicles immediately surrounded the aircraft, lights flashing through the rain. Firefighters aimed hoses at the smoking right engine while paramedics waited nearby. Exit the aircraft now, Maria instructed, quickly opening the main door. The emergency slide deployed automatically. Cold mountain air rushed into the cabin. At over 6,500 feet elevation, Eagle County Airport's thin atmosphere felt sharp in their lungs after the pressurized cabin. Move quickly but don't run, Robert said, guiding Sundar toward the exit. We don't know if there's still a fire risk. As they prepared to evacuate, Sundar noticed something strange. Among the emergency vehicles were 3 black SUVs that didn't look like standard airport equipment. Men in dark suits stood beside them, speaking urgently into radios. Who are they? Sundar asked Robert as they approached the door. Not local, Robert replied, his security training evident in his quick assessment. Federal, most likely. One by one, they slid down the emergency chute. Sundar landed awkwardly, his dress shoes slipping on the wet tarmac. A paramedic immediately approached him. Are you injured, sir? She asked, already checking his vitals. I'm fine, Sundar insisted. Please check the others. Rain pelted down as airport fire crews continued dousing the smoking engine. Captain Reynolds and his co-pilot emerged last, carrying the flight computers and logbooks, standard procedure after incidents. Mr. Pichai. A tall man in a dark suit approached, showing credentials briefly. Agent Foster, FBI, we need to get you to a secure location immediately. Sundar looked confused. FBI, how did you get here so quickly? We were already en route when your emergency was declared, Foster replied, his expression revealing nothing. This way, please. Robert stepped between them. I'm Mr. Pichai's head of security. We'll need verification of your identity. Agent Foster nodded respectfully and provided proper credentials. After a brief examination, Robert nodded to Sundar. What's going on? Sundar asked as they were led toward the terminal building, flanked by agents. We have reason to believe your aircraft was targeted, sir, Foster explained quietly. The timing and nature of the failures suggest deliberate sabotage. Inside a small conference room in the airport's private terminal, the reality of the situation began to sink in. Local police secured the perimeter while FBI agents established communications. We've identified unusual access to your flight systems approximately 7 hours before takeoff, Agent Foster explained, showing Sundar data on a tablet. Someone with significant technical expertise compromised multiple redundant systems to trigger cascading failures once you were airborne. Sundar stared at the evidence, a chill running through him that had nothing to do with his wet clothes. Why? He asked simply. Foster's expression darkened. That's what we need to determine. But one thing is clear, whoever did this wanted to make absolutely certain your plane wouldn't reach New York. Rain lashed against the small conference room windows as Sundar sat surrounded by FBI agents and local authorities. The narrow room, normally used for flight planning by visiting pilots, was now a makeshift command center. Maps of the airport and surrounding area covered one wall, while agents spoke quietly into phones in the corners. We need to establish a complete timeline, Agent Foster said, spreading documents across the table. When was the last maintenance check on your aircraft? 3 days ago, Captain Reynolds replied, still in his pilot's uniform with dark sweat stains under the arms. Everything was perfect. I personally reviewed all the systems. Agent Garcia, a cybersecurity specialist with the FBI, looked up from her laptop. The tampering was sophisticated. They knew exactly which systems to target and how to make the failures appear gradual rather than immediate. Which means? Sundar asked, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. This wasn't random, Garcia explained. The saboteur wanted to create a scenario where you'd be forced to land here specifically. Eagle County Airport was the target all along. A chill ran through the room as her words sank in. But why here? Amit asked, looking nervously at the large windows facing the tarmac. This is the middle of nowhere. Exactly, Robert interjected. Minimal security, reduced resources and... He pointed to the surrounding mountains visible through the rain, limited escape routes. We're trapped here. Agent Foster nodded grimly. We're bringing in additional personnel, but the weather's hampering helicopter access. Ground teams are at least 2 hours out. Sundar stood and paced the small room. Tomorrow's announcement. That has to be the connection. The AI initiative, Amit asked. Yes, the neural encryption protocol would change everything. Several nations have expressed, Sundar paused, choosing his words carefully, concern about their inability to access encrypted data. Agent Foster's phone buzzed. After a brief conversation, his expression darkened further. We just received intelligence that 3 known operatives entered Colorado 2 days ago. They're associated with foreign intelligence services. Which country? Robert asked. That's classified, Foster replied, but they targeted tech executives before. A local sheriff's deputy burst into the room. We've got movement in the woods on the north perimeter. Security cameras picked up 2 figures with what looked like long-range rifles. The room erupted into controlled chaos. Agents drew weapons while others moved to secure the windows. Get down, sir. Robert pulled Sundar away from the window just as Agent Foster killed the lights. "We need to move you now," Foster said, his voice steady despite the situation. "There's a secure room in the basement level of this building." Through the darkness, they moved quickly down the service corridor. The small airport, designed for wealthy vacationers, was ill-equipped for this kind of security threat. Their footsteps echoed on the tile floor as they descended a narrow staircase. "In here," Foster directed, opening a heavy door that led to what appeared to be an old storage room converted into a basic secure area. Once inside, Sundar turned to Agent Foster. "They're here to stop tomorrow's announcement, aren't they?" Foster nodded. "Or extract the technical details from you directly." The gravity of the situation hit Sundar fully. This wasn't just about him. It was about controlling technology that could shift global power dynamics. "I need to contact Google Security," Sundar said. "The full technical specs are still in New York. If they can't get to Met, they might target your colleagues instead." Robert finished his thought. Agent Garcia set up a secure satellite phone. "We can establish a protected line, but we need to be brief. Any transmission might be intercepted." As Sundar reached for the phone, the lights flickered once, then plunged the room into complete darkness. "They've cut the power," Foster whispered, his voice tense in the blackness. "They're making their move." Darkness enveloped the small basement room. For several heartbeats, no one moved. The only sound was their collective breathing, tense and shallow. Then the soft blue glow of emergency lights flickered on, casting long shadows across worried faces. "Backup generator," Foster explained, drawing his weapon. "But they'll be expecting that." Footsteps echoed somewhere above them, heavy and deliberate. Someone was in the building, moving with purpose. Sundar's mind raced. The neural encryption protocol he was set to announce would change the landscape of data security forever. If it fell into the wrong hands, or if certain governments learned how to counter it before release, the consequences would be devastating. "How many exits from this room?" Robert asked, his security training kicking in. "Just the one we came through," replied the airport security guard, a former military man named Wilson. "But there's a maintenance tunnel that connects to the hangar. It was designed for moving equipment without going outside during winter storms." Foster nodded. "Show us." Wilson moved to the back wall and pushed aside a heavy metal shelf, revealing a narrow door. It hasn't been used in years. The sound of someone testing the main door handle made everyone freeze. "They're here," Garcia whispered, positioning herself between Sundar and the entrance. Wilson yanked open the tunnel door. "This way, quickly and quietly." The tunnel was narrow and damp, barely tall enough for them to stand upright. The emergency lights didn't extend here, forcing them to use cell phone flashlights to navigate. Water dripped from pipes overhead, and the air smelled of mildew and jet fuel. "The hangar is about 70 yards ahead," Wilson whispered as they moved forward in single file. "From there, we can access the airfield." Behind them, they heard the crash of the main door being forced open. Voices called out in a language Sundar didn't recognize. "Move faster," Foster urged, bringing up the rear with his weapon drawn. They hurried through the darkness, footsteps echoing despite their attempts at stealth. Ahead, Wilson stopped at a junction. "Left leads to the main hangar, right goes to the fuel depot," he explained. Foster considered for a moment. "They'll expect us to go to the hangar. Take the right passage." The fuel depot tunnel was even narrower, forcing them to hunch over as they moved. The smell of aviation fuel grew stronger, making their eyes water. "There's a security office at the depot," Wilson said. "It has communications equipment and better defensive position." Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed from behind them. Their pursuers had found the tunnel entrance. "How much further?" Amit asked, his breath coming in short gasps from the stress and thin mountain air. 20 yards, Wilson replied. As they reached the end of the tunnel, Wilson swiped a keycard at an electronic lock. Nothing happened. "They've cut the electronic systems," he muttered, pulling out a physical key. Old school backup. The door swung open to reveal a small office with windows overlooking the fuel tanks and airfield beyond. Rain continued to lash down, reducing visibility across the tarmac. Foster quickly assessed the room. "Garcia, get that radio working. We need to contact the perimeter teams." Sundar moved to the window, peering out at his damaged aircraft still sitting on the runway, surrounded by emergency vehicles. In the distance, you can see the mountain pass that provided the only road access to the isolated airport. They planned this perfectly, he said quietly. The sabotage, the weather, the location, all to isolate us. Robert joined him at the window. Sir, we need to consider what information to protect at all costs. If they capture you? I know, Sundar interrupted. The encryption keys are the priority. Without them, the protocol is useless. Garcia looked up from the radio. I've got contact with FBI teams approaching from Denver. ETA 90 minutes due to weather conditions. Foster's expression remained grim. We need to hold this position for 90 minutes against an unknown number of hostile operatives with limited ammunition and no tactical gear. The sound of the tunnel door being tested made everyone turn. They're here, Robert whispered. Metal groaned as someone tried to force the tunnel door. Foster motioned everyone away from the entrance, positioning them behind the minimal cover of office furniture. Wilson, is there another way out? Foster asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The security guard pointed to a maintenance ladder in the corner. Leads to the roof. From there, we could reach the control tower if we're careful. A sharp crack echoed through the room as the door lock began to give way. Foster made a quick decision. Pichai and Garcia, up the ladder. Robert and Wilson, you're next. Amit and I will cover. Sundar hesitated. I won't leave anyone behind. This isn't a discussion, Foster said firmly. The encryption protocol you carry is a national security priority. Understanding the stakes, Sundar nodded and followed Garcia to the ladder. As they began to climb, the tunnel door burst open. Foster fired 2 precise shots, forcing the intruders back. Move, he shouted. The ladder led to a small hatch. Garcia pushed it open, letting in a blast of cold rain. They emerged onto the flat roof of the fuel depot, immediately soaked by the downpour. Visibility was poor, with low clouds obscuring the surrounding mountains. The control tower is 200 yards north, Wilson said, pointing to a dim structure barely visible through the rain. Robert came up last, closing the hatch behind him. Foster and Amit are pinned down. He ordered us to move without them. The gravity of the situation weighed on Sundar. 2 men were risking their lives for him, for what he knew. He stared at the hatch, conflicted. Sir, we need to move, Robert urged. Every minute we stay here increases the risk. They moved carefully across the slippery roof, crouching low to avoid being silhouetted against the sky. The control tower seemed impossibly far away. Hold, Garcia whispered suddenly, raising her hand. Movement at 3 o'clock. Through the rain, they could make out 2 figures moving methodically between aircraft hangars, scanning the area with what appeared to be night vision equipment. They're cutting off access to the tower, Wilson observed. They've anticipated our moves. Sundar pulled out his phone. Despite the situation, technology was still his domain. The aircraft systems were compromised remotely. That means they had access to the airport's network. Garcia caught on immediately. If they hacked in once, we can trace their digital footprint. Sundar finished, fingers flying across his screen despite the rain. Every intrusion leaves traces. While Robert and Wilson kept watch, Sundar and Garcia huddled over their devices, using their bodies to shield the screens from rain. There, Sundar said after several tense minutes. They accessed the flight systems through a maintenance portal. IP address leads to a server in Prague. Garcia looked up sharply. Czech Republic. No, Sundar corrected. That's just a relay. The actual commands came from, he paused, his expression darkening. That can't be right. What is it? Robert asked, glancing nervously toward the figures still searching below. The commands originated from a server registered to Quantum Valley Ventures. The name hung in the rain-soaked air between them. Your main competitor in quantum computing, Garcia said, understanding dawning on her face. Sundar nodded grimly. Their CEO was vocally against our encryption protocol, said it would destroy the industry standard. But corporate sabotage of this level. A sudden burst of gunfire from inside the building interrupted them. Through the roof, they could hear shouting and the sound of struggle. We need to move now, Robert insisted. The tower is our best chance. As they prepared to make their dash across the open tarmac, Sundar's phone vibrated. A message appeared on screen. Protocol compromised. NY team under attack. Trust no one. Sundar showed the message to Garcia, whose face paled. This is bigger than we thought, she whispered. They're not just after you. They're coordinating attacks across the country. The realization hit Sundar like physical blow. This wasn't just about him or even Google. This was about controlling the future of global information security. We need to warn Washington, he said. Now. Lightning cracked across the dark sky as Sundar and his small group huddled on the depot roof. The control tower stood tantalizingly close, yet separated by 200 yards of exposed tarmac. We need a distraction, Robert said, scanning the airfield. His usually neat appearance was now disheveled, his corporate attire soaked through. If we can create a diversion on the eastern perimeter, Wilson suggested, we might draw enough attention to make a run for the tower. Sundar shook his head. Too risky. Besides, these aren't common criminals. They're trained operatives. They won't fall for simple distractions. His mind worked rapidly, analyzing the situation as he would a complex technical problem. The airport fuel system, he said suddenly. Wilson, can we remotely trigger the emergency shutdown protocol? Wilson nodded slowly. From the tower, yes, it would set off alarms across the entire airfield. And in the confusion, we can reach Foster and make it to the helicopter pad, Robert added, catching on to Sundar's plan. Garcia checked her watch. FBI tactical team is 30 minutes out, if we can hold until then. A burst of gunfire interrupted her, followed by shouts. Through the rain, they saw figures converging on the maintenance trucks. Foster and Amit won't last 30 minutes, Sundar said grimly. We move now. Using the cover of rain and darkness, they made their way across the roof to the edge nearest the tower. One by one, they climbed down an access ladder to ground level. Stay low and move fast, Robert instructed. Use the aircraft as cover. They sprinted across the open tarmac, rain pelting their faces. Sundar's lungs burned in the thin mountain air as they reached the small corporate jet, crouching behind its landing gear. 50 more yards, Wilson whispered. Suddenly, a spotlight cut through the rain, sweeping across the tarmac. Everyone froze, pressing themselves against the wet concrete. They got thermal imaging, Garcia warned. The rain won't hide us for long. The light passed over them, then stopped and began to return. They'd been spotted. Run, Robert shouted, abandoning stealth. They broke cover, sprinting toward the tower. Gunfire erupted behind them, bullets pinging off metal and concrete. Sundar's world narrowed to the tower door ahead, his dress shoes slipping on the wet tarmac. A bullet whizzed past his ear, impossibly close. Wilson reached the door first, slamming his security card against the reader. The door clicked open, and they piled inside, Garcia firing back at their pursuers. Up the stairs, Wilson directed, already moving toward the control room. Sundar paused to catch his breath, the reality of the situation hitting him anew. In his 20 years in technology, he'd faced corporate espionage, legal battles, and intense competition, but never bullets fired with intent to kill. The tower control room offered a panoramic view of the entire airport. Wilson immediately went to the main console, typing rapidly. Triggering emergency protocols now, he announced. Across the airfield, warning lights began to flash. An automated announcement echoed through the public address system. At TE&T own. Emergency shooty devon in IT. All PRS and EL evacuate to safe zones. Garcia spotted Foster and Amick using the distraction to move from their position. They're making it to the helicopter pad, she reported. Sundar watched as confusion spread among their pursuers, unsure which emergency was real and which was diversion. Sir, Robert said, pointing to an approaching light in the sky. FBI helicopter. They must have found a weather window. Relief washed over Sundar, but it was short-lived. His phone buzzed with a secure message from Google headquarters. New York team safe. Attack neutralized. Corporate conspiracy confirmed. Quantum Valley CEO in custody. As the FBI helicopter landed and tactical teams secured the area, Sundar stared out at his damaged jet on the runway. The rain was finally easing, revealing the first hints of dawn breaking over the mountains. "It's over," Garcia said, holstering her weapon. Sundar nodded slowly. "This time, the technology we're creating, it changes the game for everyone. The power it represents." He paused, watching as FBI agents apprehended the remaining attackers. "This won't be the last attempt." 3 days later, Sundar stood on stage in New York, delivering his presentation on neural encryption protocol as planned. The audience was unaware of the bullet that had passed inches from his head, or how close the technology had come to falling into the wrong hands. As he finished his speech to thunderous applause, Sundar knew that in the new world of quantum computing and unbreakable encryption, the most valuable targets weren't data centers or servers. They were the minds that created them.